I finally got around to potting and cleaning the large quantities of pea seeds that I saved last year. I had developed a small collection of seeds of different varieties of peas. I wanted to bulk up the quantities of some of them. With others, I wanted to get a fresh supply of seeds for a trial, and there was one heritage variety I wanted to try to rescue. I was also interested in figuring out how many seeds could be produced on one pea plant. So last year, I thought it would be useful to grow batches of plants of all these varieties, specifically dedicated for seed saving, that was separate from my main growing spaces. And I thought I would try to grow these seed-saving pea plants in grow bags on some unused ground. This was quite successful, though not without some problems, and I ended up with a lot of seeds. And I think there are real benefits to using grow bags for seed saving. Pea plants are possibly one of the easiest vegetables to save seeds from, especially if we only want a few seeds to grow the next year. All we need to do is not pick some of the pods when they are fresh and green and leave them to continue to develop and dry on the plant. It also helps that pea flowers apparently rarely cross-pollinate, so it is possible to save seeds from different varieties spaced fairly close together. I have saved lots of pea seeds in this way over the years, sometimes by intentionally leaving the pods to produce seeds, and other times as a result of failing to pick all the pods. But because of the nature of the research and comparisons that I do in the gardens, I usually avoid saving seeds in my main gardens and prefer to harvest all of the pods fresh. And waiting for the seeds to properly dry on the plants generally means that there is less time to grow a second crop after the peas in the same season. We also have issues with seed saving in general in Ireland because August and September can be very wet months, which increases the risk of seed rotting rather than drying. This is especially the case during a busy summer when the pods might not be picked in time. I was hoping that growing the pea plants specifically for seed saving in grow bags would increase the chance of getting a full crop of really good quality seeds without complicating things in the gardens too much. I had 7 different varieties of peas that I wanted to save seeds for. 2 of the varieties are the ones I've been growing for the past few years to produce fresh garden or potting peas. I wanted to bulk up the supplies of these varieties so I didn't need to buy any more seeds for a couple of years, and I was hoping to also get enough to be able to share with others. I also had 4 varieties of mange tout and sugar snap peas, the kind where we eat the whole pod with or without developing seeds inside. I had wanted to do a trial of these different varieties last year, but didn't have the space. Even before knowing if any of these varieties would produce well in this climate, I thought it would be useful to produce more seeds. I figured if I was going to do a proper trial, it would be better to start with fresh seeds of all the varieties, so that variable germination rates of the older seeds would not mess with the results. This was especially the case with one tall heritage variety that I had saved seeds from over 7 years ago, and I really wasn't sure if any of them would germinate. I also wanted to save some seeds of a variety of pea seeds that I buy in bulk quantities for growing pea shoot microgreens. I wanted to see how viable it would be to produce enough seeds on my own to grow microgreens like this. I used a few of the larger grow bags for each of the main varieties of peas that I wanted to bulk up and for the pea shoot variety. With these 3 varieties, the aim was to produce as much seed as I could. I wasn't sure how many pea plants each one of these bags could support, but I sowed 25 seeds into each of the large grow bags, filled with a lightweight soilless growing medium that I use. For the sugar snap and mange tout varieties, I used smaller grow bags with only about 12 seeds in each, as I figured there would be more than enough to supply what I needed. For the tall variety with really old seed, I sowed some extra seeds, hoping that enough of them would germinate, but I ended up with only 4 plants of this variety. This 7-year-old seed had a germination rate of less than 10%. Apparently, saving pea seeds from only a few plants will not cause problems, but I'm not sure that 4 plants is enough to maintain the genetic robustness and variation of the variety. So if I want to continue saving seeds and growing this variety, I might need to grow some more next year from the old seed. I sowed the seeds in mid-March and kept these grow bags in the polytunnel until early May, when I moved them outside to the scrap area of ground to make space in the polytunnel. I wrapped fencing around each of the larger bags, held up with bamboo canes, and used canes in the medium-sized bags to support the pea plants. But this wasn't enough in some cases, as the plants were quite top-heavy and I had to tie them up a few times. And the lightweight growing medium in these bags wasn't heavy enough to prevent the bags and the plants from being blown over in a few of the windstorms that we had. It was fairly easy to just lift these plants back up, but I ended up burying the bags halfway into the ground and added larger canes to stabilize them. I probably should have done this at the beginning of the season, as this would have prevented some damage, and it would have allowed the pea plants to send their roots through the holes in the bottom of the bags to colonize the soil below. This probably would have helped the plants find all the nutrients that they need and reduce the stress those few times that I failed to water enough when I allowed the growing medium in the bags to become a bit too dry. Some of the plants did show signs of stress, potential disease, or nutrient deficiencies, which is more likely to happen with any container growing, but I don't have experience with most of these varieties. And I did wonder if these plants would be able to produce really high quality seeds if they were a bit stressed at times and weren't always able to get everything that they needed. I started picking the dry pods for some of the varieties in August, pulling up the plants as I went along to make it easier to pick everything, and I set the pods in trays to continue to dry in the polytunnel. Some of the pods on most of the varieties were still a bit green, so I moved the remaining bags of plants inside the polytunnel as a lot of rain was forecast. The seeds could continue to develop and dry under cover as the temperature cooled into the autumn, and I picked the rest of the pods a few weeks later. This was definitely a benefit of growing these plants in grow bags, to change locations to ensure better quality seeds were being produced, as well as being able to delay a labor-intensive task when I was busy with other things. I eventually moved the trays of pods into the house to fully dry, and a few months later I finally got around to potting them all, to finally find out how many seeds were actually produced. There was a lot of seeds from these plants, more than I expected. Each of the large grow bags with the main crop variety of garden or shelling peas produced about 450 grams of dried seeds each. That's about 1,500 to 1,800 seeds for each bag, or 60 to 70 seeds saved for every pea seed that I sowed, which I guess is a decent return. With 5 large grow bags growing these plants, I now have more than 2 kilograms of seeds, probably more than 8,000 saved seeds of the 2 varieties. This is enough to last me 10 years of growing at my current scale if I could keep the seeds viable that long. Each of the smaller grow bags of Sugar Snap and Mange 2 varieties each produced about 100 to 150 grams of seeds, with roughly 500 seeds collected from each bag, or about 40 seeds saved for every seed planted. Even the tall heritage variety of Sugar Snap peas that had such trouble with germination produced more than 300 seeds, which was an impressive amount with only 4 plants that grew. The pea shoot variety was not so successful. The plants did produce a lot of pods, but they contained seeds of different colors as if they were different varieties, and quite a few of them were smaller and brown. I haven't done a germination test yet, but I don't think this was so successful, and I still don't know how viable it would be for me to produce my own seeds for growing microgreen pea shoots like this. But I now have lots of main crop garden or shelling pea seeds, enough to last years at the scale I'm growing at, and still have loads to share. The supplies of Sugar Snap and Mange 2 seeds have been bulked up, and I have more than enough fresh seeds for a proper trial. If any of these varieties produce well in this climate and context, I will have enough seeds of that variety for several years of growing. Otherwise, I'll probably end up with a bunch of seeds that I will never use. And I have a reserve of seeds for the tall heritage variety, but I'm not sure how useful a really tall variety like this is in my context. I'm not sure if I would buy large grow bags like this or other containers and fill it with an expensive growing medium just to save seeds. But because I had them around from a previous season and could reuse the growing medium, I think it made a lot of sense to use them for this purpose. And it was good to be able to make use of the scrap piece of ground at the end of one of my polytunnels. I also think having the varieties separated out into different bags made the seed-saving task easier to manage, rather than trying to keep the vines separate in a longer row of a more conventional planting. And if I was worried about cross-pollination, I could easily separate the bags by an appropriate distance when the plants were in flower. It was really useful to be able to sow the seeds in a more controlled environment of the polytunnel, especially with the poorer quality seeds, and then to move the plants outside for the summer. And it was great to be able to quickly move all of the bags back into the polytunnel to get the drying pods out of the rain. I think this flexibility, to be able to adapt to the unpredictable weather that we get, and to increase the chance of getting better quality seeds, is probably the main reason why I would save seeds in grow bags like this again. Even if they are a bit of a hassle to move around and to keep secure in the wind. But I still wonder if the quality of the seeds might have been affected if the plants experienced stress from growing in these containers. but partially burying the bags in the ground would probably help with this, I think. Ideally, all of the seed saving that I do in the future would be done in a separate growing area away from my other gardens, with appropriate covers installed whenever it's useful. And I hope to develop that space soon, but for now I'll probably keep using grow bags for more seed saving explorations this year.